Hello and welcome. In this video, as you saw, I'm going to be jumping into my favorite movies of the decade. This video is specifically on the 70s, so I'm going to be sharing my 5 favorite movies from the 70s. As I mentioned in my early preview a few days ago, I would love to get some participation either in the comments, if you want to promote it on your Instagram, or if you want to do your own video of it on your own channel, I'd be happy to promote it on my community tab, my Instagram page, that kind of thing. So I just wanted it to be a fun kind of community challenge of picking our favorites from each of the decades. So let's jump into this video. Welcome once again, my name is Austin, and on this channel we talk about one of my favorite things in the world, movies, and how I tie together my faith with film and everything that's in between. With that out of the way, let's get started with my 5 favorite movies from the 70s. Now the 70s is still a little bit of a blind spot for me. Once we get into the 80s and beyond, I'm going to be doing 10 movies for those decades, but for this one I'm going to be doing 5 because there's a lot of 70s movies that I haven't seen. I'll put a bunch of them up here on screen for you to see, but starting things off with one of my favorites from the 70s and one of my favorite movies of all time, we have Alien. Alien is a Ridley Scott film that set up a really awesome franchise that I still enjoy for the most part to this day. And this movie is some of the best filmmaking when it comes to practical effects and stunt work that they do for this one. Everything is very tangible and hands-on. It's one of my favorite aspects of filmmaking to see the creative process went into building physical sets and creature design. And then beyond that, this movie is just a fantastic, simplistic story of just a bunch of people trapped up in space. This alien that is really the perfect organism, as they say in the film. So what I love about this movie is it is brilliant sci-fi storytelling, and as well, you got a ton of horror and thriller aspects to it. The monster being the xenomorph alien gets very minimal screen time, so it makes its presence on screen that much more impactful and terrifying in many ways. So all in all, this just makes for a great movie. It has stood the test of time, for me personally being one of my favorites of all time, and many others consider this one of the greatest movies ever made. I have a ton of adoration for this movie from its filmmaking points of view to its storytelling, its themes on fear and facing that fear that we all deal with as humans. I think it's a really great movie and one that I always enjoy going back to revisit and as well introduce to people. Next, we have the movie Jaws. Jaws is arguably my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. It's a really tough one to pick because he has so many incredible films, but this might be, I was gonna say, one of his best made movies, but a lot of his movies are really, really great and really well made. What I love about this one, similar to Alien, is the practicality of it. While in today's day and age, you can easily just slap a pretty good looking CGI shark in there to be representative of Jaws. In this time period, they did not have that, so they built a mechanical shark and shot all of that, and it broke down all the time. We hear in the behind the scenes stuff, and it was really hard to work with. But the film, you would never know. It's fantastic. They do a really great job of, again, like Alien, giving you minimal looks at the shark to make it that much more terrifying. The theme that's absolutely iconic by John Williams is just still one of the greatest to this day, and it's so simple in just being a few notes. I think Jaws is a really cool blend of drama with action with some horror elements at the same time. Some of my favorite movies are ones that just really well blend those different genres together. It's a really fun, exciting blockbuster with a really great adventure story with the main cast and characters, while at the same time being a cautionary, terrifying tale at times, with the shark still making people scared to go in the ocean to this day. It's another one, like Alien, that stands the test of time as one of the best movies ever made, and for me it's also one of my favorites to come out of the 70s. Next, I don't talk about it a ton on this channel, but I am a really big Star Wars fan, and I think A New Hope, what it did to set up the Star Wars universe and the greater world that we've gotten to explore over the past 50 years or so through the franchise and its different iterations and formats and all that, it's amazing to look back on this movie and go back to the simpler times of when it was just Star Wars. So for me, I consider it Star Wars A New Hope because at that point, that's the name it had, and that's how I grew up with it. But still to this day, it's such a fun, classic movie to watch. You get the classic hero's journey with the Luke Skywalker character. You get a great villain of Darth Vader, as well as the introduction of iconic characters like Han Solo, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO. All of this just really comes together for what makes a fantastic movie. Like with Jaws, you get amazing John Williams music. I love everything John Williams does within the Star Wars world, and just this movie is groundbreaking for its time, and I think still to this day, many of the special effects still look really good. And I love when movies are restricted with limitations that really force them to innovate and expand the medium and what they're capable of doing. The miniature work on this movie is incredible to see behind the scenes stuff on it, as well as, like I said, the groundbreaking effects for the movie that, some of it maybe hasn't aged the best, but overall it still looks really good, and it's a really entertaining sci-fi movie. So like I said, Star Wars has become so much bigger than what this movie started things off as, but I still love going back and looking at this movie. It's one that I can't wait to introduce to my son once he's old enough to really take it in and appreciate it. Obviously he's still a baby right now, but Star Wars is just one of those movies that you can't wait to introduce people to, specifically your kids as they grow up. So I still remember when my dad introduced me to Star Wars when I was a kid, and I can't wait to share that and pass that down to my own children someday. Next, we have a movie. I did not grow up watching this one. I got into it maybe 5 or so years ago, sometime in the last 5 years. Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween. I did not watch horror growing up, and then started getting into it as a teenager, young adult, and finally got into the Halloween franchise kind of when they kicked off this new Green movies that they're doing with the director there, David Gordon Green, I think his name is. And I wanted to go back, get into the original ones. So I've watched some of the originals, and I've watched all the new ones for the new trilogy that they did. And the original Halloween, like many people, is my favorite of the franchise. I think it's incredibly iconic. The simplistic indie film feeling to this movie, and the massive, like Star Wars franchise that it forms. And it's so much fun going back to the original and seeing the simplistic basics that they really do with it. They really do a really good job of using cinematography really well. The sets are really cool, going to the different locations they make. I think they shot this somewhere in California. Really feel like Indiana. And I mean, aside from the green leaves still on the trees, it looks like you're in Indiana in the fall time. So I think it's really cool, all that they do in this movie. It is scary still to this day. I was definitely creeped out by it. And I think it really explores some interesting themes when it comes to the embodiment of evil, specifically in a person. I think it really delves into the trauma of the events that are taking place and explores those in fun ways in the new movies. So all in all, I love the original John Carpenter's Halloween. I think it's still one of the best movies to come out of the 70s, and one of my personal favorites from that decade as well. Rounding off my list of my 5 favorites from the 70s, we have one of my all-time favorite comedies, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This movie is absolutely hilarious. I used to be able to quote much of this movie, and still probably could to this day. I got to introduce it to a couple of friends of mine a number of months ago, and they both thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think this is, like I said, easily one of the funniest movies ever made. The humor is very specific. You definitely have to be into that kind of humor, so maybe not everyone would agree with me on it being one of the funniest movies ever made, but it's so ridiculous. Again, kind of like Halloween, the indie feel to it all. It feels very, very low budget, but it plays with that aspect of the movie into its humor and its jokes. There's some of the funniest sketches and scenes that I've ever seen put to a movie. I love that this movie, you kind of, in the scenes, they almost feel like their own individual sketches, while at the same time there's this greater story going on that really gets you invested in the funniest and most adventurous ways. So I love watching this movie. It's one that I hadn't seen for a number of years until introducing it to some friends of mine a few months ago. So still, for me, one of the funniest movies ever made, and one of the best movies to come out of the 70s. There's so many iconic moments, whether it's just the opening scene of them bickering at each other at the wall, the Trojan rabbit that they send in rather than a Trojan horse, the Black Knight, the wedding where the guy goes in and just obliterates everyone, and then just the abrupt ending to the movie as we reach that climax. All of it is so funny. Even the opening credits, they just do these ridiculous funny jokes that I love. So Monty Python and the Holy Grail is easily one of my favorite movies to come out of the 70s. So that wraps up my pick for the best of the decades and my favorites from the 70s. Obviously, like I said, I'm a bit limited because I still have a bit of a blind spot for the 70s. So you're welcome to share more than 5 when it comes to your favorite movies from the decade. That's just what I wanted to share for my list. So I'd love to hear yours in the comments below, over on Instagram, or if you want to put your own video up on YouTube, just tag me one way or another, let me know, and I'd be happy to promote it as well as we go through this series. So look to my best of the 80s coming in the next few days or so to the channel. I'm really looking forward to sharing my favorites from the 80s. It's one of my favorite decades of films. So thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I will see you in the next one.